The new episode of Silo has prepared several unexpected surprises at once. Robert Sims is no longer on his wife's side. He is now acting against her. Bernard is alive, even though in the first episode we were deliberately led to believe that Sims had killed him with his own hands. Finale of the fourth episode turned out to be perhaps the best in the entire season. The tension, unexpected twists, and several major plot revelations showed that the story is moving in the right direction. After all, let's break down the episode, explain the key events, and discuss what it all means, as we usually do. Let's start with the main plot twist of the season, the return of Bernard. And here I think, for example, everyone understood that Lucas Kyle could have survived But Bernard, after we were literally shown his death, I don't think many expected to see him again. But what's even more interesting than the fact of his survival is what is happening with Robert Sims. Throughout the season, we have seen how much Camilla has changed after the algorithm made her the leader. She finally gained the power that Robert had dreamed of, but along with it, she changed completely as a person. Now she is no longer guided by her own convictions, only by the algorithm's commands. Let's recall the scene from the previous episode where she was ready to wipe the memories not just of Robert, but of herself and even her own son. It was then that Sims seemed to realize that the woman he loved was gradually losing herself. It is very symbolic that after this the door between them literally closes. This scene shows not just a physical separation, but how far apart they are now, which is also why one can safely assume that Bernard survived thanks to Robert. If you rewatch the first episode, it becomes clear that we were never actually shown Bernard's body. He was carried completely covered up, and when the stretcher approached the furnace, the camera zooms in specifically on Sims's face. Now that moment looks completely different. Most likely, Sims only rendered Bernard unconscious and staged his death. Or perhaps we weren't shown real events at all, but the version of the story that Camilla was supposed to believe. In any case, many things are now falling into place. Notice that Sims led the marshals in the other direction even though he knew perfectly well where Emmy was planning to take Jules. Furthermore, he did nothing to Juliette herself when he saw her at the pumping station. That is exactly why Emmy was so confident about where to take Juliette. It turns out that all this time, Emmy had been secretly working with Sims, who ordered the pills to be switched so that Juliette would regain her memory. If this theory is confirmed, Jules has gained an incredibly powerful ally, and their interactions will be extremely interesting to watch. Now let's move on to the past timeline, which in my opinion continues to be one of the most interesting parts of the season. After Steve's recording was destroyed, Daniel and Helen are left with only one lead. Those very unencrypted communications that someone recorded in Moldova. But the real breakthrough comes thanks to Steve's chess game, which Helen noticed in the previous episode. A strange king sacrifice makes her recall how intelligence services once used Worf to track terrorist organizations. Therefore, she and Daniel conclude that Steve might have been transmitting information through the chess game. To find out to whom exactly, Daniel turns to his former colleague, Sam. At first, he flatly refuses, as the risks to his family and career are too great. But later, he agrees to help and discovers something so serious that he contacts Daniel immediately. We don't know yet what exactly he found, but it's almost certain that the next episode will start with this. In parallel, a mysterious government man, whose name we still don't know, puts pressure on both Daniel and Helen. One is threatened with the end of his sister's treatment, the other is promised a dream job at the Times. This man tells them directly that they are meddling in something extremely serious. And at first, it even seems that both are indeed ready to drop the investigation. But Sam's call changes everything. Daniel goes back for Helen because he realizes that he can no longer reach the truth on his own. We still don't know what exactly the government is hiding, but there is a growing feeling that it concerns the shelter project itself. Perhaps the original plan really was to place people in 51 bunkers during a global disaster and then force them to gradually destroy each other until only one single bunker remains to restart all of humanity. Throughout 3 seasons, we've only heard that Iran dropped the bomb. But it is still a likely scenario that the states drop that bomb on themselves to initiate the bunker creation process. Another important discovery of the episode is that Dr. Amy has been on Juliette's side the whole time. As we learned, even before Jules stopped taking the pills, she replaced the memory-suppressing capsules which caused her memories to gradually return. Now it becomes clear why the show jumped exactly 3 months forward. That is when Amy started acting against the system. Jules is already starting to remember George, their meetings, and past events. I think we will see flashbacks more and more often from now on. It is also interesting that the latest threat to Juliette's life finally forced Shirley to realize her mistake. It was guilt that led her to Jules and allowed her to come to her rescue just in time. Although this plot twist seems super far-fetched, Shirley had plenty of time to realize she was wrong and, in general, to avoid her selfish behavior. It is obvious that Shirley's arc is currently the weakest and most forced this season, which is why her sudden change of stance looks completely unconvincing. It also seems that in this episode, Patrick Kennedy's faith finally collapses. Lucas tells him the truth. The outside is indeed deadly, and the famous helmet video was fabricated. At the same time, while Sheriff Billings' wife, for example, immediately believes Lucas, Kennedy is initially convinced that he was just bribed by the leadership. That, as it seems to me, is exactly the point of this plotline. Even when the truth becomes obvious, people continue to look for reasons not to believe it. The silos were built on lies, so any revelation inevitably gives birth to new doubts. In the very next episode, Lucas will set off to find Jules. We saw how Shirley left her all alone. And I wouldn't be surprised if Lucas turns out to be the person who reaches her first. And it will turn out that it was he who had been trying to get Bernardo back on his feet this whole time. Now let's move on to the Orla Kent mystery. The first shot of this episode, where Sheriff Paul Billings is waiting for Orla's autopsy results, immediately creates the feeling that he has finally lost control of what is happening. His wife is a member of Patrick Kennedy's organization. Paul himself is rewriting the pact, which he stopped believing in a long time ago. And on top of that, there is the death of Orla, whose disappearance seemed suspicious to him from the very beginning. And as it turned out, not for nothing, Orla Kent did not die in the mine at all, and the autopsy results confirmed that she definitely did not die from poison. Her lungs were absolutely clean. The real cause of death was a blow to the back of the head with a piece of rebar, which immediately narrows the circle of suspects. First is Ed Harwood, the head of the mine. Let's recall once more where Orla's body was found. Right in the mine. This alone makes one wonder if he might be connected to what happened. The second suspect is his daughter, Glenda. She had a clear conflict with Orla after the latter took her position as assistant to the head of supply. Moreover, Orla started dating her ex-boyfriend, so Glenda also had a more than serious motive. That is why we can be sure that the Harwoods are somehow involved in this story. Perhaps Ed just wanted to protect his daughter, or perhaps they acted together and decided to remove Orla from their path. At the same time, Mike was also behaving quite strangely. Considering he was Orla's boyfriend, his reaction to the girl's disappearance seems too calm and even somewhat indifferent. But if I have to choose the main suspect right now, it is still Ed Harwood, a man. We haven't seen it all since his last argument with Orla. All in all, as you can see, it was a very action-packed episode. Now Juliette finally has some allies within the system. Bernard turned out to be alive, and Robert Sims seems to have stopped being an enemy for good. If all this really leads to the characters uniting, the next episode could be one of the most